Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is our webinar, Filling Post-Harvest Technology Gap for Smallholders in Africa. My name is Stevie Clover. I'm the Director of Communications for Bountifield International. Today we'll be hearing from our panel, who I'll bring in shortly, but first I just wanted to let you all know that we will have time at the end for a Q&A. And so throughout, if you have any questions, you can use the Q&A box or the chat box to enter any of your questions. And we'll get to as many of them as we can at the very end. We'll have about 10 minutes for that. And well, without further ado, I'm just going to bring in Alexandra Spieldoch. She's the CEO of Bountifield International, and she is going to moderate for us today, and she will introduce the panel. So let me bring you in here. All right, Alexandra, you're on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Good evening. Thank you so much for coming to today's webinar. As Stevie Clover just mentioned, I'm Alexandra Spieldoch, and I'm the CEO of Bountifield International, which specializes in post-harvest technology solutions specifically for sub-Saharan Africa and specifically in smallholder markets. I'm calling from Minneapolis, Minnesota in the United States, where we have our headquarters. We have team members from East Africa also on this call. We have a rich history in the food sector here in the Twin Cities. We were born out of General Mills, and we have in the entire sort of existence of our organization really been focused on what we can do to meet the technology need and to improve quality and quantity of food that's being processed, saved, sold, and consumed, particularly staple crops such as grains, legumes, roots, and tubers. So thank you again for coming. I invited all of you to this webinar to jointly discuss the opportunity to further develop post-harvest technology markets in Africa from the ground up. As we all know, food loss is one of the most important and difficult challenges within rural Africa. So much processing, handling is done via traditional methods, by hand, by beating with a stick, mostly by women, which is both labor intensive and inefficient. Technology is key for communities to stabilize their food supply and take advantage of new market opportunities, including linkages with African food companies who are looking for quality supply in more volumes. However, lack of availability and access to technology for all value chains, more or less, remains an unmet challenge. And it's a chicken versus an egg scenario. Much of the time, African manufacturers lack precision tools and lower cost materials necessary to make durable and effective machines. Suppliers who import are often experiencing delays, high costs, and issues with quality, or what may be promoted as a good solution may not be the case. A machine, for example, that supposedly will process 1,000 kgs of a particular crop in an hour. When you go to test it, it only works for one crop and only 100 kgs per hour and easily breaks down. So, you know, even when a machine does perform as marketed, customers still lack financing to purchase most types of post-harvest technology, small, medium, or large. And suppliers with little capital themselves are not going to invest in a fleet of tools they can't sell. There's likely no post-sale support for repair, maintenance, or even training on utilization in many contexts. And of course, then there's the other challenges, which is that we've all experienced, which is that NGOs, governments, different projects may give away tools as part of their implementation plan, and this undercuts the market. So investment to fill these gaps is really critical if we're going to achieve impact and bring it to scale. And in my mind, it's the linchpin for agribusinesses, whether for food products or specialty goods for national consumption or for export to grow. And the good news is that market solutions are out there, ready to benefit those most in need. And so I'd like to just jump into this dialogue with our panelists today to discuss further, and with you, of course, offering business solutions, thinking about partnerships that support inclusive growth, particularly for women and youth, and sustainability in our food system with technology at the center. So the primary goals of this webinar are probably more than I'm listing, but certainly to share the experience of these expert panelists on this topic and to learn from one another, and then to create more space for dialogue and collaboration. And as Stevie mentioned, there will be a Q&A session at the end as well. There's a chat box, and just post your questions as we go along. And I've asked panelists to respond in the chat box itself, or we'll see what we can address at the end of the presentations. So at this point, I'd like to welcome our 4 panelists into the room. And Stevie, if you can help with that. We've got Dr. Dieudonné Baributsa, who's the Associate Professor of Entomology at Purdue University, and he's head of Purdue's Improved Crop Storage Program, or PICS, which essentially has developed a whole supply chain around hermetic storage bags across Africa and other parts of the world. I'd also like to introduce Geoffrey Appiagye, who's the co-founder and corporate lead for SAYeTECH Company Limited, which is based in Ghana and is manufacturing post-harvest technology, different types of equipment, specifically for reaching smallholder markets in West Africa and also looking at East Africa. I'd like to introduce and welcome Maria Jones, who is the Associate Director for ADMI Institute for the Prevention of Post-Harvest Loss at the University of Illinois. And they've been doing fantastic research on, oops, I lost my video. Can you see me? Okay, they've been doing fantastic research on, again, what it takes for technology adoption in Africa and Asia. And finally, I'd like to introduce our dear Geoffrey Nyamota, who is our Kenya team lead with Bountifield International. And he's here today to talk about Bountifield's approach in Africa and kind of how he sees things as well in terms of what works and kind of what we're looking to see in the future. So let me start by asking, by jumping into questions. Dieudonné, if we can get your video on, I'd like for you to invite you to talk for a few minutes about the evolution of PICS and how you've developed a supply chain as well as a social enterprise as a business solution, what impact this has had and why it's unique and perhaps what the future may hold. So the floor is to you.
Yeah, thank you, Alexandra. And I really apologize. I tried to use my phone to get the video on because I have a desktop and it's just having all kinds of problems, and really apologize to not have my video on. And thanks for the kind introduction and the great overview about this webinar. So as you mentioned, I'm a professor at Purdue University. So I've led this effort of promoting hermetic, solutions to smallholder farmers, I would say across Africa as well as in other parts of the world, like Latin America and Asia. So our effort has focused mostly on reducing storage losses using a simple and cost-effective hermetic bags. As you mentioned, these are PICS bags. So these are 3-layer hermetic bags. So farmers use them. Once they use them, they don't need to apply any chemicals. So as we know, farmers lose about 30% of their crops during storage. And whatever they have as solution currently do not really work well. So we know most of them use ash or they use chemicals, and some of those are expensive and ineffective. So by introducing hermetic storage, we are making this option really attractive to farmers for several reasons. One, these are chemical-free, so they don't need to apply any insecticide. So these hermetic bags can be reused for several years. So 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, depending on how they take good care of the innovation. And the cost is relatively low compared to other alternatives. So a bag of 100 kg capacity costs about $2 to $4. So what did we do to get these innovations to farmers? So we used a two-pronged approach. So first we created the demand through awareness building and training. So going to villages, training farmers on how to use this innovation. And the second part, we did supply chain development by working with the private sector to make these hermetic bags available to farmers. So as you have asked, what's the impact? So far, we have implemented capacity building in about 70,000 villages, across mostly in sub-Saharan Africa, but we also went into other countries and regions. We have trained more than 10 million smallholder farmers in 35 countries. And the private sector has sold more than 40 million bags from 2008 to 2021. So we don't have the data for 2022 yet. It's being compiled. And so far we have about 23 private companies that are licensed to sell these bags worldwide. So when we look at the impact of the innovations at the farm level, so it's about $2 billion. So in terms of return on investment. And so here what we are looking at is for every bag that a farmer uses, they make or save about $20 when they store cowpea or maize. So these are studies that we have conducted in several regions, Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, say like Burkina Faso, Nigeria, all across sub-Saharan Africa. So, and as we developed the innovation, so we realized that it was really important to transition the commercialization of the technology from Purdue to a private company. So in 2016, we created a company called PICS Global, which works to further commercialize, the use of the hermetic bags worldwide. So transitioning to a private company is really more efficient. And so a private company will be more efficient than a development or an educational institution in commercializing the innovation. So that's why we did the transition. So I will just talk about a few challenges. Some of the challenges we have, for example, in promoting bags, it's the seasonality of the product. So this is a product that is just needed at harvest. So most of the sales happen during a certain window. So so it means the manufacturers and the distributors have to time the production and the distribution, otherwise they will miss the market. So the logistics have to be aligned with the product, the harvesting time when farmers need the bag. So the one of the major issue as well is market forecasting. So understanding how many bags are needed into a market. So because this is a product that is needed over time, so we sell and then next year we have to come back and sell again. So being able to forecast and assess how many bags are needed, so the manufacturing and distribution are timed and the quantities are right is really, really critical. Because when vendors and distributors remain with unsold inventory, it really affects their cash flow, and that creates a bit of challenges in the supply chain. So, and some of the lessons we have learned, the first one is value proposition. It's really, really important as you push innovations to think about value proposition, not just you need to think about the whole supply chain or value chain. So here, in the case of our post-harvest, PICS, we think about our customer and end users. Customer can be an NGO, can be a development agency, and our end users are farmers. So thinking about all those key players and thinking what the value proposition for the, all those who are involved in promoting these innovations and the end users is really critical. And particularly the private sector. If we want them to produce and sell these innovations, we need to think about what value proposition do we bring to them. And two of the questions the private sector has asked are, where is the market and how big is the market? Because if they don't see any benefit of selling and making money, the private sector is going to pull out very quickly. So the second lesson we have learned, it's really the need for adaptive research. So because you need to follow up the innovation and be able to see what is going well and what is not going well and how do you adjust and so on. Just for instance, we started promoting the bags as a cowpea storage bag, but over time we learned that the bag will work for other crops. So we quickly switched even the brand, the logo on the bag. So the C stood for cowpea as we evolved, we changed the C, and then now it stands for crops. So being able to expand the market from only cowpea to other crops really helped also bring in more, more customers and more revenues for the private sector. So the third lesson we learned is it's best to work with the private sector who are entrepreneurs. Some of the private sector, they just want to make money. They look at, at this innovation as a one-time opportunity to cash in, and then they are not interested in developing the supply chain, which is key in sustaining the market. The fourth one is having some kind of IP, intellectual property is really important, because that kind of helps the private sector to see the benefit of the innovation. So just to conclude, I think as we promote these innovations, as we try to sustain the market, there is a need to have quite a bit of monitoring and evaluation to learn and adapt while we are working with the private sector to scale the technology. So most of the time, private sector tend to focus on one segment of the market, but as we do M&E everywhere, we can help, promote and sustain an innovation. So I will stop there, and I think in the slideshow there are a few key elements of some of the achievements of the PICS program. Thank you, Alexandra. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Dieudonné. Really insightful. I wrote down just a few things, but I certainly key points that I took away is the importance really of engaging the private sector, having a clarity in terms of what the market is, and a strong brand, as well as some flexibility and ability to adapt as you go, as you learn, for example, the big C on the bags that you mentioned. Thank you so much. I know there'll be lots of questions. Already a question around what the PICS bags look like. So if you have the means to post one of the slides, I think, Stevie, if it's readily available, we can try to do that at some point during this call. We had a montage of photos at the beginning that showed the technologies, but chose to do a different kind of a style so that we can engage in a more hopefully meaningful way with the different panelists. So Geoffrey, let me move over to you. This is Geoffrey Appiagye with SAYeTECH Engineering, based out of Ghana. Just a quick word about Geoffrey. He's a young manufacturer who is building a company specializing in post-harvest technology with big visions across Ghana, West Africa, East Africa. And you also have quite of an interesting mission around youth. I'd like to just kind of hear from you in terms of, your reason for starting SAYeTECH, what issues you've faced as a supplier, the kind of partnerships that you've been able to build, and how you, begun that process of growing your market. Again, as Dieudonné highlighted, challenges and key successes or takeaways in terms of at least where you're at now in your business trajectory. So over to you, Geoffrey.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. I really appreciate. My name is Geoffrey Appiagye, as you already may know. I'm a co-founder of SAYeTECH, where we build smart, small agricultural machines to help farmers and agribusinesses produce more and reduce their losses. We're currently based out of Ghana, and we also beginning to work in Kenya. So why we started SAYeTECH, or the story started with me. I volunteered in a rural community without electricity as a teacher, and I saw that after I completed my undergraduate degree in engineering. So when I did that, I saw that children were dragged out of school to work on farms, and I felt that we could produce machines locally so that these children would be in school. That was my main goal of trying to start SAYeTECH. But of course, we building machines locally just didn't affect the lives of children who were missing school. It actually affects the lives of a lot of women and helps reduce a lot of post-harvest losses and so many other things, improving livelihoods and reducing poverty, so many things than what really inspired us to start SAYeTECH. And SAYeTECH means Sustainable African Youth Enterprise and Technologies. And so we wanted to also build something for the youth. led by the youth in Africa, and we also would, even for our growth stage, would want young people to run it in the way young people want agriculture to be done. We looked at the dredging in agriculture currently on the continent, the use of cutlass hoes, etc., and we didn't see this was nice for the youth to get into, and so we wanted to bring in mechanization and also smart technology and for mechanization, so that the youth will be interested to get more into agriculture. And the numbers of the youthful population in Africa is increasing tremendously, and we also wanted to provide mechanization for youth, for young people especially, for service in the farm, in farming and serving other farmers, and also getting more involved in agriculture. Over the years, we've manufactured in a small period of time over 70 equipment. Our flagship is the multi-crop thresher. That beginning was led by the USAID Soybean Innovation Lab that really helped us turn out a product we later improved. But also we have other products, including a cocoa pod breaking machine, small scale feed and food and feed mills. We also have we are working together right now to do a small tractor, our own kind of small two-wheel tractor for mechanization in Africa. We have dryers and so many other products. Added to our product lines as also a mobile app that you could track where your machines are and how long they have worked. And the challenges, of course, in supply chain, there are challenges, but we source most of our materials locally, but there are engines that we import out of, we buy out of other local retailers. We know we could get it over 50% cheaper if we were sourcing them directly from the manufacturers of these engines, and they're often not also readily available, and they are subjected to a lot of price changes in the manufacturing. And we've been trying to find ways to scale up, but mostly our business to start it is a lot of capital intensive, to have a capital intensive cost to set up a fabric manufacturing site to be able to manufacture. And as well, for most of the people that have interest in our solution, in our products, sometimes it's difficult, the ease of accessing loans for especially young people and agri-businesses to purchase our equipment is also hard for our clientele. Yes, and generally we are looking to further growth in Ghana for the West African region and in Kenya for the East African region. I want to say thank you, and I'll be glad for questions.
Thank you, Geoffrey. And I posted a link to your website again. If you want to post anything in the chat, please do, so people can really see and understand the range of tools that you've been developing. And again, I hear challenges around capital to be able to expand the business. You've also mentioned seasonality being a challenge, and access to financing. I think when we get into the Q&A, we'll probably have some more questions about how you have addressed that with your customers, or how you might be able to expand your customer base. So you can keep that in mind. Thank you again, and let me invite Maria Jones into the conversation. Maria, I know that ADMI Institute of Post-Harvest Loss has done some really interesting work, research on capacity building and awareness building, the importance of engaging directly with farmers to also get their buy-in and support in the adoption process. And I think that is such a critical part of what also was successful for the PICS example, and kind of what it takes to build more demand. I'd love your insights on how you've gone about that, particular work you may have also done with women farmers and capacity building, and the results that you see and priorities moving forward in your work. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Alexandra, and thank you to Bountifield International for this opportunity. As Alexandra mentioned, my name is Maria, and I'm with the ADM Institute for the Prevention of Post-Harvest Loss. We started in 2011, and over the past decade, we have really seen such an interest in and emphasis on, food loss and food waste, with a specific focus on post-harvest loss reduction. And I think we've often hear this number thrown about of like 1/3 of the world's, food that is being produced is being currently wasted after harvest, which includes about 14% of which is actually just post-harvest losses. But oftentimes these mainstream discussions do not highlight the fact that smallholder farmers are bearing the cost of post-harvest losses. For smallholder farmers globally, this means that there's a loss of income due to agriculture being a livelihood. There's a loss of both quantity and quality of food available for their household consumption. And this is further worsened by climate change, whether it's untimely rain and drought, and of course, even shocks like COVID-19. ADM Institute focuses a lot on South Asia, specifically India and Bangladesh, with some level of work in Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, in West Africa specifically. I would like to maybe just take a minute to briefly explain what we have learned about where losses are happening, at least in the Asian context. So for example, in the state of Madhya Pradesh in India, a typical smallholder farmer in less than a hectare of land is manually harvesting grain. Let us say it's like maize in the specific season. So by the time they manually harvest or hire labor to harvest the maize, they have to put this grain in the corner of the field. They're rushing to plant a second crop of wheat. They're threshing this maize manually. Usually the grain has to be dried, sun-dried on the ground, maybe the side of the road. And usually the work done for drying is done by women who are bearing the burden of this time-intensive and labor-intensive task, which is very dependent on the weather and moisture conditions. A lot of times this grain is sold immediately because farmers don't have the space to actually store this grain within their homesteads or their households. And while it's sold immediately to traders, what happens is they get very low prices for it because it's sold immediately. And with high moisture levels, the prices are low. With increased foreign matter, the prices are low. And in case they do sell it to local mandis as well, a lot of these same criteria are used to shortchange these smallholder farmers who are already making nothing for their harvest. And all of this is further, worsened by climate change. Like for instance, this last August, the one state that we are working in called Madhya Pradesh had 20% more rain than usual, with almost $500,000 of loss in just one district because of excessive rains and how it affected the harvest and the post-harvest with inability to dry, inability to harvest on time. So the ADM Institute is based at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And as I mentioned, we were started in 2011 thanks to a generous gift by ADM Corporation. And we focus on reducing post-harvest losses through a food systems approach with a focus on smallholder farmers. Broadly speaking, we focus on four major pillars. The first thing is we do develop, promote, and scale post-harvest loss reducing innovations. We do conduct a lot of food systems research because we are based at the university. We are also focused on building individual and institutional capacity for reducing post-harvest losses. And fourthly, we are focused on sharing knowledge through webinars, conferences, online resources, and this is a plug to go check out our website as well. So in terms of your question, Alexandra, you asked us, what does it take to enable smallholder farmers to access post-harvest loss reducing information, technologies? There are three things I wanted to mention. Firstly, what we have learned is that it's important to apply targeted and contextualized solutions. There's a lot of technologies that are out there that are really great. And I love how Bountifield International certifies these different technologies and innovations. And we've also heard of some examples of mechanization, even amongst youth or hermetic bags. What we have realized is that context matters. Practices are different, crops are different, and we need to be looking at technical solutions across the whole value chain in order to reduce post-harvest losses. This means looking at understanding a system in its context and seeing what technologies are appropriate. To give an example, we recently conducted a rapid post-harvest focused value chain assessment in India, in the state of Madhya Pradesh. We were looking at a farmer producer organization that's predominantly having women members. And what we realized is that at different stages, different losses were happening. So at certain stages, like what Dieudonné mentioned, a hermetic bag was very efficient, or we are finding that hermetic bags would be the best solution in certain contexts, especially at individual level storage, maybe at household level storage for chemical-free, pest-free storage. However, in the as we look at aggregators like farmer producer organizations or farmer organizations, we're finding that maybe something like a hermetic cocoon might be more relevant for chemical-free storage or for pest-free storage. We're also realizing that having drying or threshing services offered at for a group of people through farmer producer organizations or farmer organizations might be beneficial, again, at this specific context. So again, what I wanted to mention here is we have really learned that looking at the context matters and applying targeted and contextualized multiple solutions is important if we're really trying to reduce losses and ensure that smallholder farmers can benefit. Secondly, what ADMI has learned is that it is important to build capacity at multiple levels across the food system. One aspect of the work we do is, yes, smallholder farmer training and capacity building. However, in addition, we have realized that building capacity across the food system with different stakeholders who interact and work with and for smallholder farmers is just as important. This means we're looking at government agents, we're looking at extension officials, we're looking at local universities conducting local important research. ADMI has been focusing a lot on this, I would say, institutional capacity building, both at, by which we're training. For example, recently we trained government officials from the Ministry of Food in Bangladesh on food policy and food storage because they play a very important role in purchasing from smallholder farmers in Bangladesh. At the same point of time, we are working with Bangladesh Agricultural University, a excellent university that is focused again on building solutions from the ground up that is relevant to the communities that they're living in. We have focused on labs, training, innovation development and scaling, working collaboratively with faculty and staff on multiple initiatives and research and technology development, all the way from building dryers, testing gender sensitivity of different technologies, working on scaling these technologies. And at the core of all of this is building capacity at these multiple levels with institutions that directly work with smallholder farmers. And thirdly, I would like to say that ADMI has really realized the importance of intentionally focusing on women farmers. As I mentioned earlier, women smallholder farmers are responsible for performing the brunt of post-harvest work. And we know that research shows that investing in women, we will see a lot of household level returns. In addition to just ensuring technologies exist, we need to make sure that the technologies are designed in a way that women can actually use them. They are disseminated in a way that women can actually learn about them, and that it is easy for them to adopt these technologies and continue to use these technologies. What we are doing in ADMI with this is we're working with two different projects, part of USAID Innovation Labs. One is the Post-Harvest Loss Innovation Lab out of Kansas State, and the other is the Sustainable Intensification Innovation Lab, also out of Kansas State. And in both of these, we are really scaling this use of something called the Technology Assessment Toolkit, also that came out of a different USAID project here based at University of Illinois, where we are testing currently in Ghana. What does it look like to have technologies like a moisture meter designed for women, or what does it look like to have hermetic storage available to women as part of associations that are currently buying food grains. So in our work in Ghana, colleagues at the AgReach at the University of Illinois have been working with University of Development Studies to specifically build capacity of faculty and students and conduct these assessments. And they have realized something as simple as women are unable to use moisture meters to test the moisture levels of stored maize because they can't read, and the numbers don't necessarily make sense. And how do you account for these barriers that women are facing, and to take intentional steps to ensure that women can not just access, not just technologies available to them, but for them to access it, to use it, and to benefit from it. And we have realized, again, it takes intentional efforts. It takes intentionally considering this, maybe doing gender analyses and ensuring our technologies are designed to benefit and empower women. So just to recap, like the 3 things that we have learned about what does it enable to for smallholder farmers to access post-harvest information and technologies, it's applying targeted and contextualized solutions, building capacity at multiple levels across the food systems, and intentionally focusing on women. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. Really insightful. There's so much to unpack there. And we do have some time today. I'd like to just acknowledge one of the things that you said. I think a couple of things that you said. One, the emphasis on women in your work, in your research. And I think when I also look to develop Bountifield programs, it's looking at the impact we can have on saving women's time, women farmers, and the processing that they do, but also the opportunity to bring more women into the market, in and of their own right, as managers of businesses. Often a lot of conversation around SMEs, but also micro businesses that that women tend to do very well at, actually, and also working with young men operators, et cetera. So I think there's just a lot of opportunity, again, to think about what agency and empowerment look like within a business solution. The other thing that you mentioned, I think, is just spot on, and I think all of us have experienced it in our own way around, you can have a great design for a technology, but when we get into the distribution side of things, it's obviously more challenging. What does it take to leverage, private sector investment in technology? If it's out of reach for a smallholder to purchase, for example, how about kind of looking at a service provision model and take a step up with, investing in technology, the cost of that, managing a business that then services more smallholders. And there isn't a magic bullet either. So moisture meters you brought up, obviously more thinking to do around how we utilize and train with equipment and where capacity is. But one thing isn't going to fix all aspects of post-harvest loss. So we also need to think about what's the kind of comprehensive suite of interventions that we can make to support a technology business. So let me thank you again, and let me move to our final panelist or discussion expert, Geoffrey Nyamota. Last but not least, Geoffrey, by any means, I invite you to talk about Bountifield, one-to-many approach in Kenya, why you think it's been unique or is unique, what have been some of the major results, and can you just sort of share some insights on what a path forward might look like and how we're talking about the potential to scale in Kenya and across the continent over time? Thank you.
Thanks, Alexandra, for the introduction. First of all, I would like to say thank you so much, the earlier panelists and Alexandra, for moderating this discussion. Really, I'm last but not least, because I can see as Bountifield, it's like we weave all those that have been discussing the various aspects into one to make it actually happen. And so in Kenya, we have been running a program we call Mavuno Bora, which is, when you talk about Mavuno Bora, is quality harvest. And so this particular program has been running for close to 3 years now. And what I must say is that we've been able to identify the real challenges. So I think there's someone who should mute himself. Okay, so in principle, what happens is in Kenya, when it comes to harvesting, farmers harvest, but the challenge is it also rains at harvesting time. So once that happens, it means a lot of losses happen. And so through Mafuno Bora project, what we decided to do is equipment is available to process various crops, especially the staple crops. But the challenge is many of the suppliers of such equipment, what they say, as Alexandra alluded, is not what actually happens. So we started off with a three-pillared approach where we have technology as at the center of our business service to the rural entrepreneurs as another key pillar, and access to finance. Because remember, we are talking about rural entrepreneurs, people who live in the village, who are able to provide post-harvest services to as many farmers as possible in the community. Because this machine is expensive, we needed to have these entrepreneurs facilitated to access this equipment through partnerships with what I would call anchor partners, the likes of Cereal Growers Association, FIPS Africa, and Self-Help Africa, and other partners. And so in a nutshell, to address the real problem is that you realize, as discussed here, some organizations identify that machines are a good thing, but they just apply the machine without providing the necessary technical know-how on how to use the equipment. And that already leads to failure in terms of the utilization of the particular equipment. So as Bountifield through Mafuno Bora project, what we have done is we have tailored training packages on how to effectively use an equipment, how to identify what kind of equipment is required in a particular region, and facilitating specific entrepreneurs to access those particular pieces of equipment to provide those services to farmers within their area. And so when we say one to many, we are talking of one entrepreneur in the village providing services to approximately 200, 300, 500 farmers in a particular season or beyond. And what we have done is we have made this a business for the rural entrepreneurs. So whatever service they provide to the farmers pay for them for the service. And what we have actually realized is that the amount of money, the service that the fee that the farmers pay is so little compared to the value of the crop. Like for instance, a bag of maize, 90 kilos, going for like $50. The service for that is only about $1. And to the entrepreneurs, because they know farmers will pay, what happens is they want to reach as many farmers as possible, make sure they train them on how to produce more crops, and then with that, they're able to make more business. And then, of course, one other thing we have realized is these entrepreneurs, they are great people. They don't have the money. How do they get the money? So we've also embarked on building their business capacity to kind of establish very good records that are on aspects to do with how they keep the records on their finances, their clients, and of course, how to reach out to those clients at a point so that they're able to provide their services to them. And through these financial records, they are able to keep a track record that financial institutions will notice them and provide financing to them to add a second and a third and a fourth piece of equipment. The other thing that we've also seen is that through our services, we also do what we call capacity assessment to identify, because not all rural entrepreneurs are the same. Some may be retired teachers who have gone into business. Some may not have gone to school, but they are good business people. So we do a capacity assessment to identify the capacity gaps that they have. And through that, we tailor-make specific training modules for them. And we've recently introduced digital marketing to the entrepreneurs to market their businesses on Facebook, on WhatsApp, and different other social media platforms, like the use of bulk SMS. And what entrepreneurs have actually told us is a number of them have been able to double their sales. That is like in terms of how many farmers they reach with their services. In addition to that, some of them have kept very good records to the point that they have, instead of adding a second piece of equipment, they have invested in very critical areas like wanting to expand their aggregation service to the farmers that they provide services to. A number of them also provide services in terms of like selling these PICS bags and other agricultural inputs to the farmers that they work with, and they get a commission for the same. So in a nutshell, one other thing we've also realized is in terms of insights, we've seen women entrepreneurs having succeeded more in terms of managing their business to reach more farmers, process more crops, and save much more time for the farmers that they work with. And I think it's just a natural thing that, women are the ones who are left at home to provide the services of like processing. And so by virtue of being able to connect with other women, it's easier for them to get more women farmers to work with. And that has actually enabled us want to focus more on engaging more women entrepreneurs into this model. Another aspect that we've also seen is some of these women have also gone into like aspects of wanting to engage with more machines, engaging with the buyers of these commodities so that farmers know that as they plant a particular commodity, they know there is a market. And most importantly, we also realized that the youth are very key in this whole business because the post-harvest equipment that we handle is small and is able to navigate to the very rural villages. And so the use of motorbikes is critical. And so the youth are very happy about that. In terms of operating the equipment, the youth are also very happy about operating the equipment for a fee. And also on issues to do with the digital marketing, the youth are also very excited about it because you understand how the youth can be happy to interact on Facebook and the like. One critical thing that we've actually learned is that suppliers, when they supply particular pieces of equipment and provide after-sale services, it's one way of them being able to provide like spare parts are required, servicing is required, some manufacturer aspects need to be addressed, is addressed. That has made our suppliers really sell more of these products to the rural entrepreneurs, and that has built their businesses. And the other aspect, of course, is when we look at this business of threshing and shelling, is a business that happens like maybe twice a year or in like 2 or 3 months. The rest of the year, there is not much that you can do. So we've also ensured that the entrepreneurs are capacity built in a way that they're able to provide other businesses so that they are able to continuously earn an income, generate sufficient resources, which they will use to repay the loans. And for your information, any piece of equipment in Africa that you buy, you will take care of it. But if it's given to you for free, you might not even have time to go and test it. And that is why, as Bountifield through this program, we strongly recommend that if one is wanting to participate in this particular space of post-harvest, it is necessary that the entrepreneur participate in the actual procurement. I would want to continue saying more and more, but because of time, I would want to say that partnerships very critical between the financial institutions, those of us in development, and of course, those who are already working in the aspects to do with production and other areas. Thank you, and over to you, Alexandra.
Thank you so much, Geoffrey. You said so much in a short period of time. My quick point is just that, what was interesting about Mvuna Bora is that during COVID, we actually were still able to, because of the way the model is focused on smaller scale equipment and meeting farmers where they are, to actually see real impact. Even as movement was restricted and there are other challenges with drought, the entrepreneurs were able to adopt, and one post-harvest technology business really able to reach hundreds of surrounding farmers. And I think that is such an interesting model. Of course, I'm biased, but I think it's also allowed us to leverage partnerships and grow partnerships as well with the private sector looking to have more reach in terms of their own the crops that they are aggregating and then selling, or food companies looking to again build out their product line with more quality available food available to them. So we've had a couple questions, and I would like to just address a couple anyway before we hang up. Dieudonné, if you're still there, one of the questions came from Abdullah Ndao, and it's about how are we leveraging, I mean, specifically the private sector, where we see there are these kinds of stops and starts, and maybe you have a specific example you can give with PICS Global and how you've been able to do that.
Yeah, so thank you, Alexandra, for the question, and thank you, Abdullahi, for the question as well. So the PICS Global, as I mentioned, is a private company that was created to kind of leverage the opportunity of the private sector. So where we have been, what PICS Global has been able to do is, for example, recruit different manufacturers or distributors in different countries, then license them to produce and sell the bag. And in other instances, has worked also with those private companies to be able to raise financial, to access finance to be able to scale up manufacturing. For example, in East Africa, PICS Global has been able to work with PPTL in Tanzania to raise capital so they can expand their market to cover the whole region of East Africa. So they are going to scale up the production, I think from 1 million bags to now to 5 million bags per year, so production capacity. So that will be able to allow them to sell the bags to different countries in the region, also reduce the cost of the bag. So if they're able to scale up manufacturing, that means the cost of production will go low. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's a great example, and I think that's real scale, and it's what we're all looking for. Another question was around locally fabricated versus globally fabricated or imported, and I think we all want to see locally fabricated as a top priority, but that quality can be a real issue, as I mentioned in the beginning. Geoffrey Appiagye, can you just say a quick word on how your company is dealing with that?
So as Bountifield may already know, I think Bountifield has done an assessment on our equipment and on quality and in that manufacturing, and we've also had other third parties do that. We actually have support from the American Society of Mechanical Engineers and software package from Autodesk to validate, our product development process. In terms of sourcing, comparing global production to local production, I mean, during COVID, it was very clear when we couldn't ship things around. And we've been able to produce, even though we were also affected because we don't produce engines locally. I mean, there was a clear demand that people needed equipment, and having local production made sense. Also, it makes sense in some cases because in very good cases, because even though most of the time within the hubs where there are skill, the equipment costs cheaper, but by the time they are imported and sold by other local redistributors, it costs far more than how much we produce and sell them for. So this may be few things I could say about that, and if there's any more things, I'll pick it out.
No, I think it's helpful. We could get into a whole conversation about what the ins and outs of that are, or also traditional engine operated versus solar. And I think that at least for Bountifield, I will just add my 2 cents that there's also a need to be a bit flexible where markets are fragmented. It's local as much as possible, and also to some degree, sometimes imported machinery or materials that are then adapted for the local context. And where there's solar possible, also trying to get more investment in that area too. And I know there are initiatives out there, but I've been really incredibly impressed with the way in which SAYeTECH Engineering has developed its own capacity in local manufacturing. And I think you're a real beacon of light within the African private sector. Another question came out for perhaps our last one on mentoring, and how are we mentoring operators and business owners. I think I'd like to ask Maria Jones, if you can just say a few words on, again, mentoring, capacity building, peer-to-peer, but how this has made a difference.
I can speak towards mentoring and capacity building less for operators and probably more towards young people, especially youth. I do truly believe that, like what even Geoffrey was mentioning with SAYeTECH and the work with youth are the future of agriculture, and working with youth is really important. But a huge part of that is capacity building and mentoring, both with urban youth as well as rural youth. I specifically think there's a value in working with youth at universities, whether it's agricultural universities in different aspects of agriculture, sociology, economics, agricultural economics, and that's something that we have been doing in multiple countries, Bangladesh, India, Cambodia, Senegal, and Burkina Faso in sub-Saharan Africa, and also the examples that I mentioned in Ghana and Njala University. We have also realized that working with faculty members at these universities is really important, such as, for example, we have this post-harvest loss training hub that we've helped set up at Njala University through some funds that works with faculty and students. And we have a lot of these cross-learning collaborations between University of Illinois students and Njala University students that happens to build post-harvest loss technologies, to test them out on training. And there are courses that students at both universities are taking simultaneously online. And I think all of these are such a huge part of capacity building and different ways of thinking of this peer-to-peer learning, young people learning, than just us training farmers. There's a lot more than that too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. And thank you for everybody who's been on this call. I lament that, best practices, do you go longer, do you go shorter? But I think that the best practice is always to leave room for the next dialogue and any kind of follow-up. We've had a lot of good questions and information sharing in the chat. I thank everyone. We have reached our time. I thank my colleague Geoffrey Nyamota for speaking on behalf of Bountifield, and I'd like to wish you all a very good rest of your day. And we have recorded this, and we will also share the link to this discussion during this hour in case you want to forward or review after this call. So thank you and see you later.
Thank you.
Congratulations, everyone, on all your fantastic work.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Alexandra.
Bye-bye.